Hi, folks. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to get going in just a couple of minutes here. I'm going to do some intros, and then as people kind of keep filtering in. So my name is Sarah. I am the program manager for the Growing Indigenous Storytellers Fellowship. I'm here representing JHR. We want to be recognizing and saying thank you so much to our lovely partners, the Indigenous Journalists Association and APTN News, with whom we are doing this program. It's just a bit of housekeeping right at the top. We're going to do between 25 and 30-ish minutes of chat and presentation with Mary, and then we're going to do about 10 minutes of public Q&A. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat if you would like for me to read them in that 10 minutes, or if you want to raise your hand in that question period, that's also totally good. Just to note, we are recording this, and the public-facing part will be posted to YouTube, so just be aware of that with whatever questions you're asking. And Mary may or may not ask for questions kind of throughout. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, just if you want to put your question in the chat, if you're a bit shy to ask, that's not a problem. I will read it out. Without further ado, I will introduce Mary. So Mary Hudetz, Crow Tribe, is a ProPublica reporter who has written about Indigenous issues for nearly 2 decades. She previously reported for the Seattle Times and the Associated Press, and she's a past president of the Indigenous Journalists Association, our partner, and currently serves on the board of directors for investigative reporters and editors. So Mary, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me. So let me think about this today. I know that I was asked, first of all, was excited to know about this program and about the fellows who are embracing this work of journalism right now. And was asked to sort of maybe talk through with you guys a couple of really big topics that are I think are highly technical. So I tried to adapt a bit and think about what does it mean to prove that, I think one of the best things that happens in journalism is when a source comes to you and tells you a little piece of information that seems like it needs to be known in the world. And then I think sometimes your work as a reporter is to figure out how to prove what is being told to you, as so that you can have a story and you can go to print with it. And it gets, harder and harder as you go along in journalism. But I think that's a good thing because you're always challenged in this profession. So Sarah mentioned I am Mary. I do currently work for ProPublica. I would say a little bit about my career is that I did start I think at a pretty basic level and worked at the Associated Press for 10 years, kind of going from a cub reporter over to being a beat reporter and then starting to work in investigations a little bit. I also was an editor there, but most of my work at the AP was breaking news, and then all of it was in print, and just about all of it was in the West. You could say all of it was in the West if you also consider South Dakota the West. So I think it's been a privilege to be able to spend most of my career doing reporting on Indian country, but it's not all I've done. And then now doing investigations, I think adds a new curve to it all. The flyer for today, if you had seen it, said the power of data and vetting sources. I'm going to flip that around just a little bit and say we're going to do the vetting of sources. And then data can be a part of that for sure. And I will, if there's time at the end, do a plug for the actual power of data and talk about ways you can really start to build that skill set. And then in a little bit more detail, I know I keep talking about what we're going to talk about, but here are the 3 things. I want to start here, and I'm not going to spend a long time on it, just on the idea of cultivating and vetting sources. What does that even mean? I think when I was early in my career, I was doing like four stories a day. They were really quick. I didn't have the time to really like understand what it meant, or maybe in my case, like a mentor who could show me like what does it mean to truly source and like build relationships and develop them. Eventually was able to sort of figure it out, but I think because I didn't have that like natural leg up, or that wasn't part of like my work at the start. Like I think I spent a lot of time thinking about this and what it means to do to build a source list. Um, so I think like sources for sure are the people who are as close to the information as you can get. So like maybe they're decision makers, or maybe they keep records, but they're not necessarily the PIO or the PR person, although that person can be extremely helpful. There's someone who's going to maybe tell you things that the people you're covering don't necessarily, like the agencies you're covering or the companies you're covering don't necessarily want you to know. When I start an investigation, or back when I was a beat reporter, if I was put onto a new topic, like to cover, like if it's law enforcement or I entered a new state, then I'm thinking about that investigation or that beat, like on the full level of like who is the powerful person in this case, like who gets to make decisions. Maybe that's very often the person or their agency whose actions we're investigating, and then who is being affected. So you want sources that run into that full range of people. Where do you find them? I feel this is different, I think, for every reporter, but I think as Indigenous journalists, like I've never worked in Washington, D.C. Like, um, I've mostly been, with the exception of Seattle and maybe Denver, like been in rural places. And so I find my sources in the community. And I think they're like, you're going to court hearings. This is more when I was a beat reporter and I'm doing investigations, but you're going to like meetings, and you're finding ways to, even if what I'm talking about today is going to be mostly online stuff, like finding the sources in the community, I think is your best thing. And then they're going to tell you stuff. And sometimes they'll come to you with a full on tip where you're thinking, like, they're like, this is a story. And then sometimes you're having a long conversation with them and they mention something on the side and you can identify it because you also come from the community, like, as stunning and needing more attention. So there's different ways to get your stories from your sources. Um, I think how do your sources find you? That forever will be like, if you really go all the way with journalism, like thinking about, that's something you're going to think about for forever. And like, so I think what I mean by that is, am I everywhere where my sources are? And this is not just in person, but online. And am I on WhatsApp in my case, and Signal and LinkedIn? And like, am I making it easy for people to find me and reach out to me? So next slide. So this is like the crux of everything. You're going to receive a tip. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is like very serious, but why not start a little bit with like this fun? I like to think like I wanted to find a GIF that I could say like was real actual footage of me receiving a tip. And I think at this moment, like I get very excited, right? Like you're like, someone just told you something. You haven't done the grueling and difficult work of verifying it yet. You haven't, like, it's going to be a long road a lot of times that you enter on once you receive the tip and decide to go with it. But that first one was very exciting. What do you do? So there are a few avenues. One, you have done the building of that source network that we just discussed, and the tip comes from someone you know. So if that's the case, you sort of feel that this source already has some credibility, and they're in the purple, like the purple section here. A lot of the things you're gonna want is like an interview right away if they're telling you like over text message or email. And then you want to know, like, this is just really like, might seem like journalism 101, but like the who, what, when, where, why of the tip. And when I think about who, I am not just like, not just like the flat question of who, but like who is responsible for this information you just gave to me? Who is most affected by it? Those are sort of, like I said before, like you want to know who the power players are and you want to know who is being impacted. Um, and then always like this is going to be the journey you enter is the gathering of documents or the gathering of like trying to figure out the proof to back up the tip and what is being told to you. So I'm going to ask about documents. I may not ask this person to give me documents. That is a bit of a sensitive, that's a bit more sensitive and we can, talk about it later if there's time, but you at least want to ask like, did you hear that? How did you hear this? Like, did you hear this in an email? Did you see it somewhere? Like I'm wanting to know like it's been written somewhere or there's a recording, something that can start to back things up. And then what's the best way? This question like down here, let's say I have a cursor, is not really a question maybe to ask them, but it's like just the thing you're constantly asking yourself. And I'm gonna move over here. I can't, I'm just gonna move something on my screen here. So on the pink side, you get the tip from a source you've never met before. A lot of the questions are the same, but you don't know this person for much. So I think this is maybe basic stuff, but you want to know like that they are who they say they are. Are they even saying who they are? Sometimes it's a whistleblower who, like just the very act of them reaching out to you is a risk and they can't provide their name and maybe they won't even be able to talk to you. They're just going to drop some information. And then you're going to have to figure it out from there if you're able to. So if they provide their name, though, there's a whole journey we can go on, and we're going to do that here today of like looking them up, and you can use that same journey to look up the information that the source you do trust gives you and look up names and stuff like that. So if they don't provide their name, like maybe if they email, I don't know. Yeah, like there's just different ways you can start to try to verify things. Again, you're going to ask for an interview if you can get it. You're going to be asking them about documents, or you're going to have to try to think to yourself about documents as well. And then this last thing, this is kind of where we're going to be going with stuff, but like thinking about open source material, there's like so many kind of fancy names that I think journalists use to talk about like everything that exists on the internet, and open source is one of them. It's just information, and that's what that means. That is there for you. If you can find it. Okay, so the first stop, well, let me go back real quick. So we're gonna talk in this next slide about like what the source, you might wanna figure out who the source is, or you might wanna kind of figure out more about the who of, who this, like who's being described to you in the tip, let's say. So I would say like no one, like again, you're gonna be like Mary, like everyone knows like the first thing you're gonna do is Google. But I don't think you can like anyone, I don't think anyone is really like above talking about Google in journalism. Like I think there's a lot we can do with it. Like there's the basic every person instinct to just like look up a name that you get. But there's more you can do with that. Like you can, like if, I don't know, like what's a name? Like my name is just Mary, so I don't know, like if there was like maybe I had a middle name to add or a middle initial, or you want to do last name first and then first name, and you want to think about like a million variations you can do. You want to even think about like maybe how could this name be misspelled? So just find a tad more. Sometimes you get a John Smith, and that like doesn't do a whole lot for you. But you can, if you have an email address again, like you can use that, or Maybe there's a little morsel of information in a username. If you have more than a name though, like a birthday or a general age of someone, like, oh, they seem like they're in their 40s, and or the hometown or any info that will help you narrow things down, that's going to help you like start to take some baby steps forward. But that'll show you like, well, I would say like 50%, 60% of the time that'll show you like something, especially if it's like a story that everyone is working on. But we can like dig quite a bit deeper. And I think this is like, I don't know. I mean, I was like, I think a lot of journalists are really good about doing like deeper Google searches. And then I think sometimes some of us are just not told about it until years into our careers.
One of my very early editors used to say, "Don't forget the obvious."
Yeah, it's a great tip.
Always
Yeah.
good.
Yes, that might be actually the theme of today's conversation, if there is one. Um, so let me see here. So I cannot in, 20 to 30 minutes really break down like the full depth of what you can do with Google searches. To give you some ideas, there's some stuff online. A speaker named Hank Van Ness, like I think a lot of people, I've definitely taken some of these lessons from him, but I don't know him personally, but he offers like there are free YouTube videos that you can tap into just Googling him. Um, but here's some stuff like I use all the time. So I feel authentic talking to you about these particular things. So you can just like use, I guess if you're here with me, like you can use your own name if you want to like do some interactive and Google while I'm talking. Or you can look me up if you want to and use these searches. But I will use quotes. So that's like a first step. And I'll put and some people use plus signs, but in between these points. So what are some things I told you about at the start of this conversation today and that Sarah told you? Like, my name is Mary Hudetz. I live in Albuquerque, which is in New Mexico. I'm a member of the Crow tribe, which is, I forgot to say at the start, but is Apsaalooke in our traditional language. And so they're like, that's some info that you have about me that you can look up. But maybe like, I'm not famous, so it's not gonna give you that much, but pretend it's like someone where there's just like a whole record on them and you need to narrow it down a little bit. So, in my case, like I'm currently working for ProPublica. Maybe you want to know some stuff about me that precedes my time at ProPublica, like you're really trying to dig into my background. So you can do a minus sign. This is step 2. So take out that's basically that little dash in front of ProPublica. You're telling Google to take out ProPublica and see what you can find. This might be my favorite one, but the search a site using Boolean is like Mary Hudetz, New Mexico, Crow tribe, and then the site : I'm using ire.org here because it was one of the sites I could think of. I'm on the board. I've been doing presentations with IRE for years now. And, this is like, maybe you could find like a little bit of information there about me. ProPublica, I think, yeah, I don't know why I didn't include ProPublica on that. But anyway, you can still find a little bit. But pretend like you're trying to find out something about someone. Yeah, I'm in the United States. So like maybe I want to know something on the Bureau of Indian Affairs website. So I do BIA.gov there. And I start to find a little bit that's posted on the internet that's not going to be on the public press release list. And then I might go just a touch deeper. And you can then find a file type. You could add it, like there's so much you can do, but you can also like do a broad internet search and you say Mary Hudetz, New Mexico, and like you just want to find a PDF of me, like saying something. Maybe it's my resume that you find, which can then also give you a little bit of like biographical chronology for me. But if you did like file type PDF on BIA.gov, like you could start to find like a little bit more in the way of actual documents that weren't handed to you, but are still like on their site somewhere. And then like say a little less hypothetical, like my name in here is hypothetical, but like you could do, um, I particularly love transcripts. Like I think one thing about in the US, like Native people, like people always say like there's you can't get records when you write about Indian country, but actually like sometimes there's just like these robust like transcripts from meetings and consultation. Tribal consultation is something that has to happen here. Like the government has to consult tribes on like tons of matters, and then that results in transcripts, and you can literally find dialogue that helps you sort of start to figure out like different scenes or information for your story. Um, so I don't know if there's any questions about that particularly, you can hold them to the end or we can chat about them here. But one last thing I love, I know I'm saying here that this is my favorite, but I do think the IHS.gov, like, or not IHS, but BIA.gov, like the site search might be, I don't know. It just depends on the story I'm working on. But narrowing the time of your search. So the second bullet point I had said, like, take out ProPublica to find out maybe some stuff about me pre-ProPublica. But you can also just go up to this tools, oops, and do it, like hit that arrow. I hope, can you guys see my cursor, by the way?
We can see the cursor, but if you click, like, we can't, there's no drop down if you click on it.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
that's a static image. Okay.
Yeah, this is a static image. I'm glad to know that. So the cursor. So you just hit the drop down, which I can't do here for you, but you'll see like you can like tailor the time that you're looking for. You can do like by a year, by a month, or you can custom search and then like narrow it to like a certain year that is of like key interest to you, or a certain day even. I love it. A lot of people love, I just put it down here, they love the Google image search as well. It's not actually in this panel up here that I have today, but people, you can drop a search in. I think a lot of people know this now, but you can drop an image into Google and then it'll give you like some information about it, that you can, like if you have someone's picture and you want to know who they are. So how do you like put this into practice? I was thinking about this, and we had there's this excellent editor that Graham Brewer, who a lot of people within IJA know, and I worked with on this story. And we had been hearing a few years ago about like, you got to look at UC Berkeley on repatriation. And we were doing this huge project on what museums and universities continue to hold from Native American grave sites that should have been returned under the Native American Graves and Protection and Repatriation Act, which is a 35-year-old law. And Berkeley was like, for people say you should, like look at Berkeley. Well, everyone looked at Berkeley. Like one of the things was like, yes, they're the ones at this point in time in 2022, like who had a very large collection, were really struggling to like make progress. And so I think sometimes as a journalist, you're thinking, do you just sort of like, do you follow the pack, or do you say, well, that's been really well covered. Is there more for us to do? We had this smart editor who like took that knowledge and just did some Boolean, if I recall correctly, like did some Boolean searches. I didn't do the search myself, but found a PDF. Like if we went back here and we see the file type PDF, like that showed, I believe, transcripts, but some sort of documentation from a meeting where tribes were expressing concern about the specific collection at UC Berkeley. And months later, after that evening Google search, we had this very lengthy story in which we gathered many, many documents to build out and do lots of interviews. Another 101, but yet so much you can do with it. Social media. So you're going to want to take that name that was given to you or that person who reached out and um, just look them up in all of the sites, especially like, you guys know as well as anyone, but like which site are they, most likely to be using, depending maybe on their like age or what they're up to in life. So those are the basic ones at the top. I think probably self-explanatory. LinkedIn, I just think these days, like such a gem right now for reporting. I think social media sites kind of, especially these days, like come and go, like which in their prominence and like which demographic is like really gravitating to them. But LinkedIn, I think, is like a fantastic place to find people who work for an agency or a company that you're really interested in, or like even better, sometimes is like recently left because they might feel just a bit more free to speak with you. So you can type in, I think the drill, but just type in the company and the search name is the simplest way. If you haven't done it already, LinkedIn is not telling me to say this, but like to sign up for LinkedIn for Journalists, it's a program that they have where you can get like these free premium accounts, and you have to kind of go through a process of like proving you're a journalist. Just I'd say Google LinkedIn for Journalists and find your way. But like allows you to directly message someone who doesn't know you, which is really like kind of gold. Um, and just do some searches that maybe you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Um, and then this one, the WhatsApp and the Signal, I think those really kind of straddle like the world of social media versus messaging. But I would say like, Signal, I think you kind of have to have their number and like maybe their handle, but WhatsApp, I mean, like if you have a person's phone number, like just take it and maybe their name. I have to double check, but definitely a phone number, just take it, plug it in, and you found them. And maybe you found them on a platform they feel a little bit better about talking to you because WhatsApp, it is owned by Facebook, or Meta, but it is also encrypted. All right. One other, wait, there's more. We'll talk about databases. You also don't have to necessarily do FOIAs for this. This is also in the realm of open source and trying to find information that you can help you prove your story or figure out if you have one. So people searches, maybe Google didn't really do enough for you. So you're going to jump on some sites that a lot of us love. Nexus, Lexis, I'm not sure if y'all have that at APTN, but it's a good one. You can, criminal record, address, phone numbers, lots of information, just put it into the people search. If you have Nexus, Lexis, we can, I think we can skip Spokeo. I don't
Yeah,
use that
I'm
one.
not actually sure. Um,
There's another, I think typically like paid subscription. But I don't know, like I don't hear a ton of journalists talk about truepeoplesearch.com, but that one I'm just like, it's so easy. You just enter the URL and plug in the name or phone number and it usually comes up. And I have always found the number in my case, like to be useful that it gives me. You might get a bunch of other like stuff in there. They might ask you to click on something that makes you pay for it, but you don't have to do that. Um, so that's a basic. Keep trying to find people. Criminal and civil lawsuits. Another one. Go to again, I don't do reporting Canada, but down here, like we just,
Canly is going to be the answer.
what's
Um,
that?
Canly, Canlii in Canada,
Okay.
canly.ca.
I think that one's self-explanatory. With you just the one, you do want to know if someone has a criminal history a lot of times. A lot of times, like this is nuanced, but maybe you are treading and thinking about how you want to incorporate that information into your story. But as a reporter, it's probably just nice to know on background. And then I think I've heard other reporters just like kind of sing their praises of like civil documents just to find out more about a person and maybe bankruptcy filings to understand like maybe their finances, if that's an issue. Um, Professional licenses. This one's great. Down here, like we have, usually it's the Secretary of State's website that might be a place you look, but the Department of, like every state has a Department of Health, and you use something called the National Provider ID, like for especially for doctors and nurses, and you can just start if you go to like the Department of Health website and look someone up like medical license up, then you can start to take that National Provider ID to like every sort of medical related site to look up this person. Bar associations for lawyers, um, property records. I do love down here. Usually that would have happened like at the county assessor's office, and I think that's still an important stop, and I'll explain why, especially for Indian country in a second. But then homes.com has like, maybe as a homeowner it feels a bit too detailed, but like can like tie your name to your to your address, and like as you know, you being the owner of a certain property. But county assessor, that's where like a homes.com is probably getting their data from, or a Zillow. Zillow doesn't give the property owner's name though, just FYI, last I checked. But like a county assessor, like I think I've had some luck with them. Like, you want to know here in the United States, like, is something tribal trust land, or is it fee land? Is it privately owned? Is it under the jurisdiction of the state, or is it under the jurisdiction of the tribe and feds? And like you can start to get like shape files, or like a certain type of file or data set that can tell you, like, can break that down like track by track. So it's really helpful if you're reporting in an area where that status can shift, you know, from one property to the next. And then the last thing, like if I want to find out more about an organization I'm reporting on, I'll go to like our ProPublica's Nonprofit Explorer. Just go to ProPublica.org, and at the top you can it's just literally at the top of the website. You just click on it to find some like US nonprofits like Indigenous Journalists Association, and find all their filings of a certain form with the IRS. People might not like really think of it this way, but it's also a good way to find, I've used it to find phone numbers of like, I did a story earlier this year on food, like food operations, because a major grant program was getting canceled in the United States, and tribes had used it in a really like interesting way over the years to return to like food sovereignty and like procure their own traditional foods. But I couldn't really find sources, like people at the grassroots level to talk to me. And within Nonprofit Explorer, I could start to find some food type of nonprofit, found names and literal phone numbers. Like I would literally call someone up and catch them on their cell phone with some of those filings, which was super helpful after trying to brainstorm about how to find them.
Totally. In Canada, that would be the CRA, and
Okay, awesome.
like corporate registries are going to be specific to each province and territory. Sometimes you have to pay money to have access to them, but sometimes you can get a bit of information without the money, and that's often helpful. Mary, I just want to jump in. We've got about 5 minutes left on.
Okay, that's really helpful to hear.
Perfect. Sorry.
No, that we just covered like the meat of this
Yeah,
conversation. So thank you for like bearing with me.
totally.
Now like let's think about like how again do you apply that? Well, at the start of this year, like ProPublica, another news outlet, did an investigation into this really difficult like Medicaid scandal in Arizona, where operators of like treatment programs and sober homes were recruiting patients into their programs and then often not providing that care to them. And sometimes the outcome was quite tragic. So I was one of the reporters on this, and basically all the stuff I just told you, like databases, social media, Googling, came into play with this specific story. And I would say like these were the reporting highlights we published with the story, but this was the information, not maybe in the specifics, like maybe we didn't hear the number 40, but like this is information that was brought to us and that we had to then set out to figure out and prove. And then I guess, in hindsight, that is what we did. So I would say with the unheeded warnings, like this was like we wanted to know, one, like what did the state agency know and did they like not act quick enough to stop this crisis before like they told the public about it, before people started to pass away. And so that part of the reporting I won't go over because it involved like an immense amount of public, like obtaining of like public records that weren't in the public domain just yet. But with the unrecognized deaths, I can kind of break that down. And then the seeking of answers from families. And that I think required like really backgrounding the behavioral health providers that had sort of set up shop and build a state agency for healthcare that many people felt was not provided. So this is just kind of like what we did. I can say really quickly the breakdown was we told the story of we found the 40 people, but then ultimately told the story of one specific man who was about my age and had lived in a community called Zuni Pueblo in New Mexico and went to Phoenix for treatment, Phoenix, Arizona, and passed away. And so how did I find him? I did a public records search for the medical examiner records, found the full list of names and started reaching out, which is a delicate process and probably a different presentation, but reached out to the family members found them using Nexus and True People Search, conducted interviews with those who were willing, and then also like got a sense of these like individuals' time seeking treatment and like the years that they did so, and looking for then from there sort of like figuring out like putting that person's name into databases again, finding out where they may have lived, were those places where they lived tied to like sober home owners or behavioral health programs or places that had signed up for a license to provide this type of care. So that's kind of like a very advanced story where we used all of those tools and methods. Did this sort of the same with the behavioral health provider who, this individual was in a few behavioral health programs, but one of them to just sort of get a sense of this person and like what sort of like citations they had in the past and whether they were providing care like that raised questions about care they were providing or didn't. But it doesn't all have to be that advanced. I'll just kind of close out here and say like, you could also just run with one document. Here's some, or not even like in this case, I think this is a story I did many years ago. I was working for the AP and just got this quick tip that like the city here in Albuquerque was hiring to come help with the police effort to like do better. And I think down here is create a more effective and community focused police department. Actually had a history, and our police department also has had like this really difficult history with use of force. And someone just heard like maybe this guy has a past that is worth like learning more about, and using those people search tools, you just led you to the Star Ledger newspaper in New York where he had lived previously, and you had your story that he had in fact himself been involved in a use of force case and coming to a city that was trying to address that issue. So you're doing the background check that maybe the city did or did not do. I don't know. And I will not do this last one, but it's just like another example, and I will share the slide deck with Sarah so that she can share it with the fellows.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. We are at time for the public session, but I'm very happy to keep it open for another couple of minutes if anybody who is not a fellow has any questions. I'm not a fellow, so that counts for me. So I will ask you, Mary, what do you find was the biggest change in your journalism practice when you went from kind of that hard news or beat reporting into more investigative stories?
Yeah, I could actually see it when preparing for this session. Like I was kind of trying to go back earlier and find like sort of what we might call ground ball sort type of like stories versus home runs. And um, I could see like going from stories that were maybe more like based off of a news conference, which like is so important. That is a part of journalism too, but into like doing stories that the world wouldn't know about unless I started, if less I use these tools. Um, yeah. And
Yeah,
I would say
totally.
also got into journalism because I wanted to like, yeah, everyone has their own reason for getting into journalism. But if I really think back to like when I was younger, I things upset me at home. I thought there were, I didn't use the word inequity at the time, but like there were inequities and I wanted to like bring those to light. And so I think those sort of tools I presented today, like I think finally helps me get there.
Excellent. Gabrielle Nelson from Buffalo's Fire in Bismarck has a question in the chat. So they asked, how soon do you act on a tip when you get one?
I mean, ideally you're like acting right away, like if it's really hot. But sometimes you're in the middle of something else. And so then you're looking at like if it's like usually I think if it's going to be a story like you're so into it that you want to like be doing those sort of Boolean Google searches at night when you're watching TV because you just can't like get your mind off of it. But yeah, it just depends. Um, I think that's the hard part though, is like making sure the person who reached out to you that like you take them very seriously. And even if you're not acting on it at that moment, like that you're very interested. But also like thinking about the importance to the public. Like if I am in the middle of something and um it seems like it needs to be known, like I also like tried to be really honest with the source about that. Like, I can't take this, but maybe we know another colleague who can, or another news outlet even.
I think that transparency is really, really, really key.
Hmm.
Excellent. Thank you. Happy that helped, Gabby.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions?
I have a question. How do you kind of make that transition from working like normal, like beat reports to doing investigative work?
I think like that story, I think the last one I just shared with you like is a good example of where you're like starting to like turn up stuff like I think that was a 600 or 500 word story. It's really short and like but you unearthed something, and so like I think starting with those was really the key. Like it was like where beat reporting and investigative reporting sort of blended. But I suppose that's like it wasn't, now that I'm talking to you, like it wasn't that tidy. I also had to just remember this. I also had to get a fellowship that like paid for, I got to stay employed at the AP, but like gave me a year where I could like do investigative reporting. Um, and I don't know that I would have gotten that like if I was, like I needed a nonprofit to give me that opportunity outside of my newsroom to learn how to do the work. Does that make sense? Um, I
Totally.
think there's a lot of people like ideally like your newsroom is like fully supporting you and like you get to just do that and it just evolves that way. But sometimes it helps to have allies and other players.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think it's more of a gradient than a hard line between beat reporting and
Mhm.
then like moving into investigative, right? So I think that
Yeah.
um, in your beat reporting, you can move towards more investigative stories.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll do one more if there is one more, and then we'll wrap up.
I guess I was just curious if any of you guys had, I know it's sensitive and if this is like you can't share in public, that makes sense, but like anything you feel like you've gotten to prove or like you're hopeful to like corroborate with records or verify. Um, I should also say, like, I was talking here a lot about um, stories that come to you, like, versus via a tip
Mm.
from an individual. But I think, like, in like when writing about tribal communities, like a lot of the stuff that is worthy of investigation is stuff that is systemic and things that maybe you yourself have lived with or you've seen people have to deal with, or like, we did repatriation. That is something that has been with Native people since like colonization, basically. So like, there are like many ways to find story ideas and like start to think about how to prove what this like nugget of information is.
Um, if anybody has anything that they want to bring up, I don't want to cut them off. But I'll say that often my advice to newer reporters is, you are your first audience.
Mhm.
Like if you think it's interesting, if you think that it's a story worth telling, then you should pursue that. And maybe the people around you don't think so. Maybe you decide differently later as you pursue the story. But if you think it's interesting, then that's one person at the very least. Caroline.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah, so there is a weapons manufacturer here in Philly. Their office is here, and but they manufacture in like Iowa or somewhere in the Midwest. And I'm pretty much like just graduated J school, so I'm still like just trying to freelance like even basic, like not basic, but like beat reports. But I would like to like figure out how to do an investigation on them. But I have asked other more experienced journalists before, and I imagine you say the same thing. They're pretty much say like just start doing something, like just start looking into them some way or another.
Yeah, I think that Googling is like, it just gives you like the background you need, and um, I didn't mention it here, but I think also like government accountability reports, the GIO.gov. It's just like you just want to educate yourself on the basics of the issue as you're also trying to find out stuff that people haven't heard before. And that can be really helpful to do, look at those sort of reports. I don't know if it applies in that case, but just thinking of that.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. If you have any feedback, please do send it to canadian.programs@jhr.ca. Yes, that is the last thing I copy pasted. And if you're interested in more in this series, we're doing a few more of these before the end of the year. So stay tuned on JHR's and IJ's social media. Thank you so much.